Begin our public hearing regarding 2 Litchfield Road. Sure, yeah, please. I'll snag that. Yeah, that would be great.
See ya. You collecting these? No problem. I made notes in mine. Yeah. So, you can keep it.
All right, regarding 2 Litchfield Road, we have an application for the potential demolition of a barn on the property. At the March 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Heritage and Historic District Commission, David Ellis made those in attendance aware that the property at 2 Litchfield Road was posted as for sale. Since this property is under historic preservation easement, the Historic District Commission decided that an inspection was necessary. Results of that inspection were that Mr. Flyer indicated his efforts in the structure consisted largely of removal of debris accumulated over many years by previous owners, and extensive efforts were made to remove vermin, including a colony of bats. Barn was in disrepair when Mr. Flyer bought the property and remained so. In 2007, prior to Mr. Flyer's ownership, the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance Historic Barn Assessment Program reported that the barn required about $60,000 worth of restoration work. Since then, we've had our town building inspector visit the property, and the results of that inspection were that it is unsafe. I will open the floor to Ms. Gandia.
Mr. Flyer's on his way in. He just stepped out for one moment. Would you mind if we just wait a minute until he
No,
comes
that's
in?
quite all right. He's on his way in now. Mr. Flyer?
Good, okay, go ahead. Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Laura Gandia. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Devine, Willamette, and Branch. I'm here representing Richard Flyer of CC Properties, who owns 2 Litchfield Road and has owned the property since 2017. This property is unique as it has 3 layers of regulations on it. It is zoned C3 with the Historic Overlay District and also is encumbered by a historic preservation easement deed. It is approximately 1.3 acres in size. And I believe most of the members here are aware of what happened in the property back in 2006. The property became the first private property to be placed in the Historic Overlay District, and at that time it was rezoned from AR1 to C3, and a historic preservation easement deed between the town and the owner was placed on the property at that time. The property boasts a structure with about 2,844 square feet of living area that has been used both for residential and commercial uses. An in-ground pool was present on the property, which has been which was removed by Mr. Flyer for about the tune of approximately $25,000. Also on the property is a 42 by 32 barn in size that sits on the property line, the Mammoth Road property line, as this is a corner lot. And that barn is very close to the property line. This commission is familiar with the barn and the property, as Mr. Flyer has appeared before you several times seeking a certificate of approval, once for a sign and another time for pictures of artwork to be placed in the windows. And most recently, Mr. Flyer appeared before you to discuss the condition of the barn and the structure. On April 27th, I believe Mr. Mayen and Mr. Butler, as members of this commission, visited the site with Mr. Flyer, and those meeting minutes note that the barn was in disrepair. Members agreed with Mr. Flyer that little could be done to save it, and the conclusion was the current condition of the barn is dilapidated at best. On June 5th, 2023, the town council took up this matter as well. At that point in time, Town Councilor Butler stated, "I think you are missing the point here. I met with Mr. Flyer and inspected the property. I can tell you the barn, the roof is ready to cave in. The sills are rotted, and there were a couple of members that would not even walk into the barn because that is the kind of condition it was in. They thought I was crazy for walking in." So with that background, we are here to ask for permission via a certificate of approval for demolition of the barn based on public safety concerns. On April 24th, 2024, Nick Connor, building inspector, Brad Anderson, Mr. Flyer, and myself met at the property. At that time, Mr. Anderson declined to enter certain portions of the barn based on his own safety concerns. Mr. Connor prepared a report that you have, and I just want to review portions of that report with you and also for the public. And that report, that is dated May 5th, states, "It is obvious that there has been no meaningful maintenance performed on the structure for quite some time. The roof beams," and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, "the roof beams on the east half of the roof are severely sagged and appeared to be on verge of complete failure. The sheathing on this half of the roof was replaced with what appears to be scrap plywood done in a slip-slide manner. The remainder of the roof sheathing boards are rotted. The severe lean on the cupola is a result of the cupola being supported on one side by the sag and purlin beams. The exterior trim and siding are rotting and falling away, along with many of the wall boards. And historical preservation of the barn would require a ground-up renovation, starting with a stone foundation, sills, walls, beams, and wall boards. The entire roof would need to be stripped, half the roof purlin beams replaced, the roof resheathed with boards, and appropriate roofing material applied. All the exterior trim, siding, doors, windows, the cupola include, would need to be replaced after repairing or replacing any broken or rotted wall boards. Given an exhaustible source of money, any structure can be saved. However, in my opinion, repairing the structure as it should be done would be impractical." After that, I did have a follow-up conversation with Mr. Connor where we had an email exchange, and I had that for you. Do you want me to give it to you?
Sure. Thank you.
And that was on July 17th in preparation for this hearing. After our conversation, I said to Nick, "This is to confirm our conversation yesterday where you stated that there are public safety concerns with the barn, particularly the rear portion of the roof, that could fall in at any time. As we discussed, my client is requesting your attendance at the July 25th, 2024 Heritage Commission meeting to delve deeper into these safety concerns. Thanks again, Laura." And he responded to me, "Hi, Laura. At this time, I can't commit to attending the Heritage Commission meeting, but I can confirm our conversations that we had with one correction, I think with one addition," because then he goes on to say, "The purlin roof beams on the entire east half of the roof are severely sagged and appear to be on the verge of complete collapse. The boards on the west side of the road are rotted, and key areas of wall beams and corner posts are rotted and separating from each other, partly caused by the fact that the foundation is almost non-existing, causing the structure to shift." The town zoning ordinance requires Mr. Flyer to appear before you and to apply for a certificate of occupancy to demolish the barn per section 4.6.2.6.c of the town zoning ordinance. The same zoning ordinance also provides under section 4.6.2.8.c where public safety needs require the removal of a building within the district, and as determined by the building inspector, the Historic Commission shall allow removal. Mr. Connor made this determination. He made it based on public safety needs, and the zoning ordinance is clear that the commission shall, not may, it's not a may, it's a shall allow removal. With that, we are mindful of the bond's once historical value, and Mr. Flyer would state that that historical value has been lost due to changes to the structure and lack of repair and upkeep. We have had dialogue with the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance about options of saving the barn. Given the condition of the barn, the options, if any, were limited. We recognize that this is only one step in the process and are prepared to work collaboratively with members of the community and the Historical Society if we are granted approval and when we start the process. So I thank you for your time and your consideration, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Laura.
Question. Laura, the New Hampshire Preservation,
Yes.
what did they comment about the building?
I reached out to them, asking them, like, is there a way, they didn't comment about the condition of the building. I
Okay.
asked them, I told them what was
Yeah,
happening or
yeah.
what we were doing.
Yeah.
And if they knew of any other options of, people or, grants or funding that we could do to help
Okay.
save the barn.
Okay.
And they didn't have any.
Or give them the barn to replace, put somewhere else in New Hampshire. They didn't want it.
Okay.
And that dialogue is still ongoing, too.
At
Only
one,
17% of the building is viable according to the town. Who was the gentleman?
Nick.
Mr. Connor.
Yeah, 17% is physically viable, not rotted.
at one point in this report, a figure of $60,000 was mentioned. Sorry, please bear with me.
First page under inspection. In 2007, prior to Mr. Flyer's ownership, the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance Historic Barn Assessment Program reported that the barn required about $60,000 worth of restoration work. In 16 years since then, both the need and the cost of preservation has undoubtedly grown.
Yep.
It would cost about 700,000 plus to replace or restore that barn properly. And there's no income that would support it.
Okay.
Public hearing, right? Public hearing.
Yes, yep. All right, I would like to open the floor up to members of the public to make comment.
Do you want us
At this
to
time.
remain or to go back?
Yeah, you can remain. I'm sure there will be questions. Mr. Ellis, please. Yeah, actually, if he could,
David, do you want to sit over
Do you
here?
want to sit here?
That's all right, maybe it would help if, that's what I shall be talking to. I couldn't my face stand very well.
Is there enough? Make yourself comfortable.
I'm Dave Ellis, I live at 1 Wilshire Drive. There's 3 items that I want to talk to. The historic nature of this property is well known. I've spoken before this commission several times on that. The first, I believe that the application is not compliant with the ordinance. The zoning regulation, section 4.6.2.8, criteria C, demolition, states, a request for demolition will be based on structural instability or deterioration as prepared by a registered architect or professional engineer. I ask this question with due respect because I know Nick Codner is a pretty knowledgeable building inspector. But is Nick or Brad Anderson, or either of them registered or a registered architect or a professional engineer? These are formal state licensed qualifications. When I looked them up, neither Nick or Brad are in the state licensing database. Without that report, this application appears to be invalid. It should be therefore disallowed and resubmitted with the correct report. The one note that I would make is if the Commission does decide to issue a notice of disapproval, it has to be delivered before August the 2nd, or else it will automatically default to approval. So you only have until August the 2nd to get that into the hands of Laura. I will comment that in Nick's report, he focused on that 2007 report about the barn condition and what was needed to completely restore it. That's not actually required of the easement. It's highly desirable, and I'd love to see it happen. But in order to comply with the easement, it just has to get it to the state that it was in, basically when that report was written. The second item I want to talk to is breach of easement. Again, Nick's report says it's obvious that there has been no meaningful maintenance performed on this structure for quite some time. Now, a few months ago, I came before this very commission and said that I was concerned about the barn. Nick's report is fully consistent with what I presented then. If you look at the historic images in Google, those things you can go right back through, it shows that from about 2006 until about 2017, there was evidence that somebody had been doing some repair work. The windows and so on had been painted, things like that. After 2017, there has been no activity except for the temporary boarding up of the windows that this commission approved back in 2019 so that Mr. Flyer could resume repairs. He said at the time it was temporary and he was going to be starting repairs. My conclusion is that based on Nick's report and the Google evidence, it looks like the lack of adequate maintenance is due to Mr. Flyer's own negligence. The resulting increased cost of rectifying that isn't stated in the report, but it's really hardly the town's concern. Mr. Codner's report demonstrates that there's been a breach of easement, and that requires the Commission to issue such a notice. That's the clause 5.1 of the easement. If Mr. Flyer resubmits with the professional engineer's or registered architect's report, that can state the compliance cost for consideration, but it should not be, the cost should not be for a total restoration. It is just to comply with the easement, that's structural stability and repair to the easement condition. The last thing that concerns me, my item 3, is the motive behind this is really just to boost an excessive profit. At the May 25th, 2023 meeting of this commission, the minutes state Mr. Flyer reports that his attempts to sell this property have failed in large part due to some of the restrictions in the historic preservation easement. When initially placed on the market, his asking price was $550,000. That was far above the then valuation of $342,000. The price was subsequently reduced to $500,000, but that's still far above the latest town assessment, which is $424,000, and that revalued everything in the town at market value. The property was acquired for $2,008 in 2017. That was well below the then market value, partly because of the easement. It seems to me that a sale would come sooner if a realistic price were being asked, and it isn't the town's responsibility to release Mr. Flyer from his easement responsibilities just to increase an extremely large profit. I'm going to yield at this point. Would you like that for your
Thank
own
you, David.
records?
If you'd like me to take it.
You can take it. I have an
I
electronic.
would like to respond to Mr. Ellis. Well, there's some things I'd like
Just a
to
are we allowed to ask questions at this point based on Mr. Ellis's presentation?
Of course.
Briefly, are either Nick Codner or Brandon Anderson a registered architect or a professional engineer?
I don't believe they are.
No,
I don't know
they're
that.
not.
I'm gonna say no.
They're not. So, Laura, as an attorney, do we have an issue with the application based on their not?
So the zoning regulations that was quoted to, it has three things when it talks about demolition. So I'm looking at the zoning, and it says, "With the public safety needs require the removal of a building within the district, and as determined by the building inspector, the historic commission shall allow removal." And then the second one is, "A request for demolition will be based on a structural instability or deterioration as prepared by a registered architect or professional engineer." Now, I don't know if those two are meant to go consecutively, or if that's meant to read, if you have public safety needs and it's been determined by the building inspector, then we can move forward with removal. Now, a request for demolition based on a structural instability, that's already been determined under section 1. I think that could be read either way, so I do understand and appreciate Mr. Ellis's point of view. And I don't work for the town anymore, so I'm not going to make any type of zoning determinations or decisions for that. But you have 1 and 2. I would put forth on behalf of my client that 2 would not be applicable here because we have the public safety needs that have already been determined. And if you did get a required, I mean, I read 2 as being somebody wants to remove it for other reasons than public safety. Again, I'm not going to make that determination as to how that's supposed to be read. I see both positions. Our position is that if we met 1, 2 is unnecessary because we already met 1, and report on structural instability or deterioration as prepared by a registered architect, we don't believe it's necessary. If the commission does believe it's necessary, then we would offer that that be made a condition of approval, and we could abide by that at that point in time.
Not the only attorney in the room, Laura. Not to put you on the spot, but is the town got a position on this one way or the other?
No, on the contrary, the town has been engaged through our attorney in discussions with Mr. Flyer through Attorney Gandia. Obviously, that request was put forward with respect to the barn. The commission is well aware of that. And both the town council and the town staff recognize that this is really a decision that rests squarely under the Heritage Commission's jurisdiction. You have all the same written testimony, if you will, and the application that we have. I think that the commission needs to make a decision on the application as presented and consider the various arguments that have been put forward. Mr. Ellis is correct that the commission has 45 days from the date of submission to make a decision. Otherwise, it is automatically approved. So I would just, encourage the commission to make a decision based on all the information that it has in front of it.
We have 8 days from today, in other
Right.
words. Means basically, we more or less need to make a decision tonight.
Well, I'm not sure
or
that
within the
that's
next few days.
true, Mr. Chair. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Town Manager, as a member of this commission, I have some privilege, I believe, in terms of delaying this to the next regularly scheduled meeting.
I don't, that certainly if this were the town council, that would be the case. I am unfamiliar with any rules of order that the Heritage Commission may have or not have.
When I Googled it, it suggested committees and subcommittees had the same privilege.
Of the town council?
In terms of, not all of their stuff, but in terms of delaying a meeting to the next regularly scheduled meeting, delaying a decision.
Give me a minute to think about that. I
Okay.
think that, I mean, if there is a desire to not make a decision tonight, I would encourage that the board has that discussion about whether
Mr.
a
Chairman.
majority of the board agrees with that position, because that would be the preferable avenue, I think, instead of invoking a privilege that I'm not sure exists.
This is a pretty highly charged issue. We've gone around years and years about this. I think the best thing to do right now, I agree with Nick Gardner. I've been in there. I'm not a registered architect or engineer, but I do agree with Nick. I think his report and his information is reasonable. I think we should take it a step by step. I think what we should do is request from the applicant to get a registered architect or engineer in there to take a look at it and give us their professional opinion on it. To do anything else at this point, in my opinion, is just a waste of time. Let's get the engineer, let's get an architect, and let them come back with a report, and then we'll take it from there. That's my opinion.
I personally would agree. I was thinking of saying pretty much the same thing. I think it would be somewhat irresponsible to go on a couple of opinions, despite the fact that I highly respect Nick Hodner and I think he knows his stuff. But our zoning regulations do state that there should be an engineer that looks at this.
Mr. Chair, I would, so if it's the consensus of the board to continue, my understanding is that my recommendation would be that the board continue before August 2nd, in order that it has that information, or that it takes a decision to deny the application tonight without prejudice.
That was my personal suggestion, but I'm gonna try to get some more opinions from board members before we move forward.
And secondly, Mr. Chair, if I may, before the board does that, I would just encourage that any public comment, additional public comment be received tonight.
Of course.
May I respond to Mr. Ellis, please?
Sure.
I think it was a little disingenuous, at the very least, in terms of his second and third comments. If one would put the picture back up there of the barn, thank you. There is no basic foundation.
I'm sorry, I'm a little hard of hearing.
Okay.
Let me come close.
Here you go. There is no foundation.
I am aware of the state
There,
of the barn.
Can I just move the mic forward so that the people at home can?
there is no foundation. The stones don't even, in most cases,
Mr.
touch
Chair?
the base of the building.
Conversation's directed towards
Yeah.
you. And not-
Yes, please.
Say that again?
Could you just direct the conversation towards me, please?
Okay, could you move up a little?
Each other.
I can, but you...
Oh, I want you to hear.
Yeah, all right, well, thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Laura.
Most of the barn is basically the beams inside, which you can't see here.
Yeah.
You're invited in any time. Just give me a call or whatever, and I can pick you up. Although I'm not allowed to drive right now, but I can have someone pick you up. And inside, all of those beams have to be replaced, all of them. And you will notice when you go there.
That would be part of the professional engineers or architects
Right.
report.
Right. But I can only say that if you were to go there, you would take one look and not want to climb up. You can see the beams broken. You can see them hanging. I don't know what kind of work was done, but most of those windows were broken when we bought the property. I didn't do it. It didn't happen under our watch.
I never
You said we did.
suggested that
Mr. Chairman.
You mentioned that
Mr.
we
Chairman, can
didn't
we stop
repair
this?
or restore the
Let's,
building.
let's,
Mr.
time out,
Flyer.
guys.
Okay, I'm just saying it wasn't done.
Richard, could I talk?
Yes, Mr. Butler.
We're talking about an engineer
Yeah,
or an architect looking at the building.
right.
I understand your position, but let's stay focused on what we're talking about.
Okay, but we
In
do-
my opinion, and I think the board needs to move quickly on this, it's my opinion that we requested an engineer or an architectural firm that has a stamp, go in there, take a look at it, and see whether or not it meets or comes close to what Nick Codner, who's our building inspector, issued. And we don't do another thing until we have it. Let's take it one step at a time.
But-
And if that means that we reject this application tonight to get that, let's do it. It doesn't mean they can't come back once they have the report.
Jim, I'm just trying to say
I-
that we care about our reputation.
I understand that.
We've restored over 1 million square feet of historic properties around New England.
But you have to understand, let's stick with the issue of a registered architect or a registered engineer that gives us a report.
Okay,
Let's do it step by step. I totally understand. I know your background. I know believe me, I know what you've done in the past and I know who you've worked for. I'm not debating that at all. But this is a very unusual circumstance, and guess what? You and us have to work together to resolve this, or it'll never get resolved.
we've tried for over 7 years
I understand that.
and spent a lot of
That's
money
enough.
doing it, if you can imagine. Okay, just a couple of short things here.
Wait 1 second. Mr. Chair, if I could just respond to some of the comments, and I believe we're taking more public input tonight.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Yes.
I would just request of the commission, I know Mr. Ellis made points, but I don't think they're relevant to what we're talking about. So I feel like I need to respond, but I'm asking the board, when it's taken further public input, that we really remain focused on what's at issue. I know there was stuff about the easement, there was, other, information about compliance with the easement, lack of repair by one owner compared to another. I don't think that's what we're focusing on tonight, and I think if we get into his motives and development opportunity, we're gonna spiral, and I don't think that's gonna be productive. So I think just really staying on point to the public safety needs of the barn, which is part of the application, may be the most prudent way to go, and I'll leave that to your discretion.
Okay, but just
Agreed.
finally,
Mr.
one
Flyer,
more
please.
thing, and that is
Mr.
our
Flyer,
finan-
please. Please. I agree. Personally, I think item 2 is actually subject to the report that comes back from the engineer. We need that report in order to know really what needs to be replaced. We need to get a professional opinion of somebody as far as what maintenance needs to happen or would need to happen for it to be salvageable. So I think that needs to be the point that we should focus on for the remainder of the evening, if we could, please.
Okay.
At this time,
But item 3 is very important, and that is questioning our financial motives.
but that is outside the purview of our discussion, Mr.
Well,
Flyer.
that was made public, and that is absolutely irrelevant, and it is wrong. He doesn't know the
It will-
economics or what we
It is not
spent.
relevant to the rest of the discussion tonight.
But
I'm
it was
sorry, but
mentioned.
we need to
It
move
was mentioned,
forward.
and I want to disagree with it 100%.
Understood.
Fine, that's on record. That's fine.
I'm going to open the floor to public comment. Mr. Ellis, if you would like to begin, please.
When that report...
I just need you to approach the microphone,
Sorry,
please.
I just wanted to make sure, when you request that report, that it should deal with restoration to the degree necessary to comply with the easement. It does not need, and probably should not, deal with a total restoration. The purpose is to get the barn stable so that it can be preserved eventually.
If I could respond, I'm going to vehemently disagree with that position. That's not what the zoning ordinance says. If we're going to focus and hone in, as this commission seems to be doing, saying that that's a requirement, that request is for demolition based on structural instability or deterioration, and that is it. Adding anything more to that is outside the scope of what's provided in the town zoning.
And the building is exactly 100%. The building is 100% of what we got when we bought the property. We've maintained it that way.
Mr. Flyer, we have to stick, please,
Stably.
to the subject at hand. So the line item stating that a request for demolition will be based on structural instability or deterioration as prepared by a registered architect or professional engineer means specifically that they will be commenting on structural instability and deterioration as a necessity towards demolition. Any other members of the public that would like to speak? Ma'am, please.
We spending time with you today? Christine Perez, 5 Wesley Drive. I'm looking at this from an entirely different aspect. When all the information about the Lions building came about over the past year and a half, I really didn't get the historical bit behind it. But my eyes have been opened by all the work that people in this town and all the information that people in this town brought forward about the Lions building and the historical aspect of it. So that's why I became interested in this, because this is another historical building in town. It's my understanding that when this property was purchased, that the historical preservation easement deed was included was received in that. And it appears in going through this that this hasn't been followed. There's many things in here that over the past 7 years doesn't appear to have been followed by the present owner. And that concerns me because actually in this, there's actually a part of it that says if you don't do it, I gotta find it, breach of easement. And it doesn't appear that the town or whoever would be responsible has followed through on this breach of easement. But that being said, I'm concerned about the fact that we keep using the term public safety. This is a private building. This is not a public building where the public is walking in and out and going to this building. So why do we keep saying that it has to be demolished for public safety? It doesn't make sense to me. But that just came to me with these comments. But what does concern me is we have a town and a group of town people, a large group, that want to go over and above to preserve a historical building. But yet, this historical building we're going to just get rid of this piece of history. I really would like to see that the owner has to he signed this and he agreed with this and he had obligations to meet over the past 7 years. And it doesn't appear that those obligations were met. The obligations were to keep it the way it's supposed to be. So to just get rid of it because, so something doesn't work anymore, we're just going to get rid of it? Because I don't take care of a car, I get to demolish it? Well, maybe I do because it's my private property. But if it was historical, do I get to just get rid of something because I didn't do what I wanted to do? This is a historical barn, and it has obligations that haven't been met. Thank you.
If I could, if I could respond, again, I think we're going off track. I
Yeah.
thought we had an
We are.
understanding that
Correct.
we weren't going to be talking about breach of easement. We weren't going to be talking about obligations under the historical preservation easement deed. That's a private agreement. Well, it's an agreement between the town and Mr. Flyer. It's not subject right now to what we're asking. And again, I'm going to ask the commission to be mindful of that with public comment, that we stay on the issue of the public safety and the structural instability. That's why we're here. Those other things.
With
like-
respect,
Yep.
I see where you're going. However, public comment is
public
open for
comment.
the public to make their own comments.
That's fine.
It requires an answer.
Right, then I will respond. So, based on that, again, I think that's an agreement that Mr. Malaguti has been working with Mr. Flyer for years now on that. Well, the town, not for years, with Mr. Malaguti, that has been under discussion. In public safety, as the town knows, public safety is inherent in public and private property. You look at the town's variance criteria. Every private property who comes before the zoning board of adjustment, the first criteria is public interest, which includes public safety, the health, safety, and welfare. So that is why that language is in the town zoning. Public safety applies regardless if it's private or public. If that barn was to collapse into Mammoth Road, that's a public safety concern.
Understood.
But
Thank you for the
there are
legal
some
distinction.
other public safety issues. If you look at the barn and you look underneath the door of the barn, there was a large granite piece that was at the entrance going in.
Mr. Flyer.
That was taken away by the present owner.
Let's please stick to the issue at hand, please.
Let's stop. Stop. Richard, we're in public, you don't mind, do you? We're in public comment, okay? Everyone in this room has a right to get up and say what they want to say. Whether you agree with it or I agree
Do
with
we
it.
have
No,
a chance
stop.
to
Wait a minute.
respond to that?
Wait. They have a right.
I know.
Whether I agree or disagree, they have that right.
But they've
So
made
let's
comments.
listen to what they have to say.
Absolutely
Let's listen to what they have to say.
unreasonable.
Attorney Gandia, this is not helping your case.
I understand.
Can we go on with public comment, please?
Yes, next member of the public, please approach.
Ron Dunn, 12 Quincy Road. Mr. David Ellis stole all I was going to say, so thank you, sir. I just want to second what he said. And I just want to point out, I think one of the biggest things Nick Cogner states directly in his memo, he said it is obvious that there has been no meaningful maintenance performed to this structure for quite some time. And part of the agreement was that the current owner is supposed to do maintenance. So this barn is the way it is now because the current owner didn't maintain it. So I would just like to see the barn saved. I agree with you guys. Let's have an engineer come out and look at it. But I do think the barn should be saved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn.
I could respond? Am I able to respond to each comment?
I'd rather,
Save it to the end?
yes, please. Any other members of the public that would like to approach?
Ray Breslin, 3 Gary Drive, and I appreciate what everybody's trying to do here. I don't want to hold up the operation here, and we do need to stay focused. But I think, you know, the safety issue kind of concerns me because who's going to go into the building? And it is a private building. If it's really concerned that it's going to collapse and fall down on somebody, then perhaps it should be cordoned off so nobody can even go close to it, if that is in fact the concern. The building has been there since the 1840s or whatever. What's been done to it, I'm sure there's been maintenance done to it over that period of time. There hasn't been much maintenance done to it recently because of cost or whatever reason. But it is a historic building. We in the town of Londonderry do appreciate history and historic buildings. This has been designated a historic building. Yes, it needs a lot of work, and that's something we don't necessarily need to go into, but we do need to determine whether the building is in fact, by an expert, going to collapse and hurt somebody, because it has been mentioned that this is public safety we're talking about here. So I can appreciate what Mr. Fly is trying to do. It's his property, so forth and so on. And but in regards to the decision here, I think we do need to have some professional take a look at the thing so everybody's on the same page. Personally, I'd like to see, if nobody wants the building, have somebody come in and remove the building. I guarantee you there were people that would love to have that building. They'd come in and disassemble the thing. I'm not gonna do it, but, thank you for allowing me to speak. Well, maybe I would.
Any further members of the public that would like to speak? Yes, sir.
Of course.
Jason Goldman, 158 Mammoth Road.
I'm sorry, one more time.
Jason Goldman, 158 Mammoth Road. Yeah, I think kind of echoing what Ray had to say, I think it's obviously a risk to the actual applicant for this. You know, he can't obviously go into that building safely. And I think we shouldn't take that lightly, considering it's his private property. And, you know, I love conservation, but conservation comes at a cost. I just don't want people to forget that.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Okay. As we've spoken about,
Can I
I
have an
think
opportunity to respond if this?
the best, I will give you an option momentarily. I think that the best option would be, A, to have somebody come and look at it, and to write out a report. I think that all of the other things that have been talked about tonight are subject to the results of that report, personally. Please.
Just two minor comments to address things that were mentioned during public comment. At the June 5th, 2023 Town Council meeting, Town Manager Mike Malaguti stated his obligation was to maintain the property at the same level of historic preservation, if you will, as when he acquired it. And after a recent inspection that was conducted by the Heritage Commission, it appears that he has done just that and even put money into the property. So I just wanted to make that clear for the board. And again, to address Mr. Burslin's comment, we did reach out to the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance to try to get somebody to come in and take the building. And we do recognize the perceived historic value to members of the community. And like I said, we are willing to work with them.
Great. I think that pending the results of the report, as Mr. Butler has said multiple times, this is going to be a multi-step process. We're going to be working together on this, probably through multiple meetings to talk through this and try to come for the best resolution for everybody. Part of the reason that we're going to deny the application, or I assume we will tonight, is to allow this issue to move forward and make sure that we get as much input from professionals as possible, as well as the public.
And Mr. Chair, I'm hoping it would be denied without prejudice so we can resubmit with the report.
Of course, of course.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments from the commission?
I have some input.
Sure.
A couple things. One is the report that's done by the engineer after this is denied, as I presume it will be without prejudice. I think we need to see a report that talks about not only the current state of the building, because that's important, because that'll address the public safety end of things, but also put some direction to us in terms of, can the building be brought back to safety, okay, and at what cost? So we have an understanding of that. I think that'll be very relevant to our decision on whether or not demolition is appropriate or not. So I just want you to be conscious of that. I'm not even suggesting at this point that it be brought back to the state it was in 2007 or 2017, but in terms of bringing it back to a level of safety, what would the cost be?
And if I can just delve into that a little bit further, I mean, bringing it back to a level, is this like a historical level? Because, I mean, you can, build it ground up as, per Mr. Connor, we can build it back up, but to add the historical features and the historical architect and stuff. So I just want to understand the
In my
direction.
mind, to bring it back, and obviously I'm one member of the board, in my mind, bring it back to a level where we can say it is not a public safety
Structural stability.
structural issue. Okay? If the cupola is unbalancing the roof, I would assume, I think that was an add-on, if I recall correctly, Mr. Flower, that perhaps the cupola should be removed. Some of the beams need to be replaced. What has to be done to be brought back to a level of public safety?
And if I could just comment on that. So if it's brought back to a level of public safety, I understand that, but that level may not have any historical value. And then the historical nature of that barn doesn't exist. So for example, if somebody came in and said, we could, bring this barn back to a certain condition, but it's not gonna look like that. It's gonna look like something that the town is not going to be happy with, meaning the people who want to see that historical character, what they believe exists. That's where I'm getting a little bit confused as to, I understand the public safety concerns you want it brought back. So when I'm dealing with the engineer or the person who's preparing the report, I think he will ask me, he will say, well, okay, what can I do to take that bond and not have a public safety concern? Well, I can do that, but it's not going to look anything like that. It's not going to have any of the historical charm. I'm just trying to figure out how you want me to navigate that.
Do you know what? I think we're more concerned, I think, right now about, I'll speak for one person, about the public safety aspect of
Okay.
it. So let's bring
Okay.
us back something that
Sure.
addresses that.
Okay.
Now, because there's a little leeway there, if you bring back something to us that looks like a patchwork horror show, okay, we'll definitely slap that back into your lap, okay? That's not what we're looking for. But I think, in fairness, at this point, we need to know not only what's the current state of the building as required by the ordinance, but also what would it take to preserve the building, at least from the point of view of being safe for the general public. So it won't be falling down on Mammoth Road, your terms.
Understood.
Which would be a secondary to the basic principle of the report, which is the structural stability and deterioration.
Right, and it's my understanding that's what we're obligated to do, nothing more.
I wanted you to know
Richard, just wait a second.
the roof
Right,
has
but-
several
I
layers.
know, but they're gonna know that.
They're all wet.
Right, they're gonna do that. So, again, I just want, I understand, Mr. Mayor, what you want, but again, we, as the applicant, we're bound by what's here. And what's here is different from what's being requested of us.
Sure. I think that the focus of the report needs to be on the structural stability and deterioration per our zoning ordinance. Secondarily, I think it would be good to have some kind of estimate of what it would take to return it to being structurally stable, but also in a historical fashion. And that part of it is simply for us to make a determination moving forward of whether or not it's best to tear it down or to potentially try to find a way to restore. So I think both things are important. To get the report only saying whether it's structurally stable or not kind of leads only in one direction, to demolition or not, whereas the other also gives us an opportunity to know what we could possibly do to restore.
And I know the answer's gonna be no, but I'd be remiss of asking, based on the preservation easement, I don't know if the town would be willing to help with the cost of obtaining that structural engineer to do this, if there's any funds available for that. Because we do have that easement that goes both ways between both the town and Mr. Flyer. So if
I
there
believe,
isn't the
Mr.
ability for
Malaguti,
that.
would have to be voted upon, and there would be a whole process for that, correct?
Correct. I can tell you that the zoning ordinance requires the application to be accompanied by a report. The town is not the applicant. The town is not seeking demolition. And so I think it would be incumbent on the applicant to supply that report, or the certificate of authority would not issue.
So the answer is no.
Understood.
The short answer.
But we've had several break-ins into the property.
That's outside the purview of this discussion, Mr. Flyer.
That's not relevant right now.
That's the safety issue.
All right, we're gonna take a vote. Do we need to vote on this, Mike?
Yes,
Yes.
if I may, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that if I understand the consensus correctly, that the commission specifically referenced 4.6.2.10E that states a notice of disapproval will be issued if, in the opinion of a majority of the commission members present and voting, that the applicant's proposal does not meet the criteria of 4.6.2.8, specifically the provision of that report.
So moved.
So I believe that your motion is to deny without prejudice this application, specifically for the reasons stated in 4.6.2.10E.
Yes.
Thank you. Would anybody like to second?
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Your application has been denied without prejudice. You're free to reapply.
Okay, thank you.